I think self-empathy is the foundation of empathy for others. So when I start accepting my emotions, understanding my emotions, talking to myself with kindness, and acknowledging what am I feeling, what am I going through, trying to understand what's the message of my emotions, what is it? Then I get to connect with that feeling and understand, like cognitively and emotionally. And when my daughter or my sons or my husband come to me, then I can relate.
Welcome to Season 16 of Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand that the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Thanks so much for watching or listening. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I am joined by Alejandra Guevara, who's originally from Bolivia. She's a Pilates instructor who believes our mental, emotional, and physical well-being are deeply intertwined. And she is also the author of The Little Book of Empathy, a pocket-sized guide that invites readers to explore and embrace empathy in their everyday lives. The heart of her message is always simple. You are not alone. And while you may not control what happens to you, you can build resilience through empathy and a growth mindset. Alejandra is a member of the National Alliance on Mental Illness and a strong advocate for mental health, healing, and resilience. And at the heart of her work, Alejandra is on a mission to share empathy as a superpower for well-being, especially for Latin American women. Welcome to the show, Alejandra.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you. It's an honor to be in your show. I look forward to a conversation.
Well, I'm excited to unpack all that you have to share. I'm excited for what we're going to talk about. And I always love to hear upfront what the journey is to empathy. So I wonder if you might be able to share the backstory of what brought you to this, to center empathy in your life.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned in the introduction, for me, empathy is a superpower. And I discovered during difficult times. My journey with empathy has, I would say, 3 phases. The phase number 1 is the early absence of empathy. The other is a health crisis. And the other is the rebuilding myself with healing and growth with the support of empathetic people. So I'll start with the absence of empathy. I grew up in a home where it was very rich in material goods and it was very poor in empathy. My father was emotionally unpredictable and at times aggressive with my mother. I found myself supporting my mother and shielding my siblings. I had to suppress my feelings and I took on the role of the good girl. In the outside, my world in the outside, life seemed normal. And inside, in the house, I know that I was on a constant flight and fight state. At 17 years old, I came to the US and to study. I fell in love with now my husband, and I decided to stay. My parents and my siblings all constantly criticize my lifestyle and my personal choices. I felt manipulated and unsupported, which I would say that is the opposite of empathy. And it's amazing also how the power of the words can hurt or heal. When I was 47 years old, about 44 years ago, I hit a health crisis. I reached a turning point where the gaslighting of my family, and my parents and my parents especially, and the criticism just affected me mentally and physically. I found myself with intense anxiety, panic attacks. I was shaking every time I would see the phone and their calls. And I think I was having flashbacks from hurtful memories when I was a child. So I was unable to relax and constantly distressed. I didn't know what was going on with me at that time. And I felt alone in this experience, and I felt very awkward, thinking that what's wrong with me, punishing myself instead of being kind to myself. And at that time, I reached out to people who I thought they would be able to help me. So a close relative of mine told me that my soul, I was telling all I was feeling that, and she told me that my soul was sick. I went to confession and I reached out to my priest, and my priest suggested that I pray, that I carry my cross, and that I forgive. I reached out to a doctor because I lost a lot of weight, and the doctor was alarmed by how much weight I lost, and he thought that I might have stomach cancer. Then another relative who's in mental health insisted that I apologize to the people who hurt me for distancing myself, and even guilt trip me with religion. And at that time, I was seeing a therapist. That was my first time in my life to see a therapist, so I didn't know much about it. I just went to a therapist they recommended, a friend, and I felt very dismissed, misunderstood, and she was more focused on charging me and scheduling our next session. So with all this panorama, with all these people, I felt more alone in my experience. I felt unseen, I felt unheard, and actually I felt worse. My symptoms started to aggravate. So at night, I would have nightmares, flashbacks from hurtful experiences. I was sweating, my heart rate would go up. And you might know, and people listening to this might know, that these are symptoms of big trauma. And now I know that this is PTSD. So my husband was very concerned. We didn't know what to do. This was also the time when the pandemic started hitting, and there were you couldn't leave the house, wearing masks and all of that, hospitals closed and everything. So my husband reached out to a friend of his from college who's a doctor. And Anita, by then, I was disabled. I just couldn't function well. I was foggy. I just didn't know how to survive. I was going literally day by day. My husband was very worried about me. So he came to the house, and that's an empathy healer. As soon as he came in, he didn't mind about the mask. He got very close to me. He sat by me, and he just approached me with this kind look in his eyes, willing to understand what was my experience, what was I living. And with a soft, kindest voice, he reached out to me and he said, Ale, what are you feeling? And what's going on? Tell me. And to me, those words felt like a weight, off my chest, thinking, finally, somebody gets me. Somebody's here willing to see what's going on, because I don't even know what's going on with me. So Mike urged my husband to take me, and the next day I was admitted into treatment. And there, my experience was very scary, and everything was very strange. It was very difficult to be there, actually. The environment, the language also. I speak English, but in those cases, when your emotions, you just want to speak Spanish. And also there was at the hospital, there was a, no touch policy, like touch. They couldn't touch. And for a Latin American, Anita, no touching, it's part of our language. We we touch like, hey, and we need that touch. We are used to affection and hugs. And so it was very hard for me, because one time I reached out to a nurse and I was like so devastated. And I said, can I give you a hug? And she said, I'm sorry, we're not allowed to touch. And to me, I just couldn't know how to respond. I felt more isolated as well. But there I found another empathy healer. Her name was Nancy. She was a nurse there. And Nancy knew me. She saw me. So she would reach out to me. And when nobody was seeing, she would come up and hug me and say, everything is going to be okay. And you'll be all right. Because I didn't know. I was in a complete fog. I couldn't think clearly. And she's like, it just takes time. Be patient with yourself and be kind with yourself. So I will never forget those words. So when I left the hospital, I left with that understanding, the gravity of PTSD and the treatment that I needed to take. But most of all, Anita, I literally felt the belief that healing was possible because of these two people. Like, you'll be okay. I see you. I hear you. You're not alone. So to me, these three sentences really make me feel like maybe I could do it. So then 4 years, fast forwarding 4 years, I find myself here after tremendous inner work of therapy, of trauma therapy, that involved the healing and now growth, with the support of two amazing doctors, my therapist and my doctor, and the help of people, like unexpected people also, like the nurse and this friend and other people along my journey that I would overlook, that they really taught me the power of empathy. And I highlight this also my husband and my 3 children and the circle of friends that I have. So that's my story, Anita.
Well, I'm sure anyone who's listening and watching it have all felt our empathy lift as you're telling the story. There's, I don't know if I'm going to get the quote right, but something about every person's specific story is universal. And so, maybe somebody who's listening or watching might not have been through exactly what you're describing, but can relate to some of what you're describing. And there's a soothing part of the story, which is that you are better and you did get the support that you needed. So I'm wondering, so thank you for sharing. And I'm glad you're well again. Yeah. I wonder if you could share what you learned about maybe empathy or other things you've learned through that healing journey.
Well, during that healing journey, I learned about self-empathy, importance of self-empathy. I learned about that empathy is an innate capacity, innate trait, beautiful, that we all have. It's a hidden superpower that is waiting for us to shine others, and shine in us ourselves. And we can nurture like any other muscles. So we can cultivate empathy to make a better world, make more connection, human connection, healing, hope, and growth and flourishing as well. So many fruits out of it. And also something that is very important, Anita, and I think you mentioned right now, is that you're not alone. Like you said, experiences are different, hardships are different, but once people can connect emotionally with the wound, might not feel the same, but see, I know how hard it must be, So let me tell you about self-empathy. That's something that I learned, because during the hard times, you tend to beat yourself up, or I shouldn't feel that way. suppress our emotions because I shouldn't feel this way. I should be happy. I should be grateful, when it's not the case. So what I learned is give yourself permission to feel. Give yourself the grace to feel. Accept what you're going through, because our emotions, our feelings are telling us something about ourselves. And I think that's very important, that what is it going on? What do I need? So that was like very important to accept myself, because I felt a stranger to my own self. And I was like, no, 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 no. But when I started understanding, having compassion on me, like for what I went through, then I start understanding, like, yes, maybe I need a hug of myself. Maybe I need to do something good for myself today. And my therapist would also say, Alejandra, treat yourself, talk to yourself with the same kindness that you would talk to your best friend. Also, Anita, it's very important that you matter. We each matter. And our well-being, physical and emotional, is very important. And that is something that nobody can take it away from us. So it is okay to set healthy boundaries if they're going to affect us, our health, no matter who that person is. So that's about self-empathy. I don't know if I should continue on, or you have any questions about that.
Well, I think a big lesson from your own traumatic experience and healing journey is if you're sharing that self-empathy is one of the key takeaways. I think that's a beautiful message. That's a beautiful, beautiful message. And I trust that this is something you've integrated into your life now, and maybe even modeling for your children. And
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, and actually, and I know, because to have empathy on others, I think self-empathy is the foundation of empathy for others. So when I start with I know when I start myself, accepting my emotions, understanding my emotions, talking to myself with kindness, no? And acknowledging, what am I feeling? What am I going through? Trying to understand what's the message of my emotions? What is it? Then I get to connect with that feeling and understand, like cognitively and emotionally. And when my daughter or my sons or my husband come to me, then I can relate, because I don't know exactly how they're feeling. Everybody's experience is different, but I can understand and see what are they feeling? Frustrated? Are they sad? Are they happy? And what can I do to support them? Mm-hmm. But the self-empathy is a big part, and it seems easy to say, but it is very hard to do. Mm. And I think the kindness of the compassion words are very important. And I really like the meditation of, I think you heard about Sharon Salzberg. I think you mentioned her on your book. So it's like, I am at peace, I'm happy. May I be happy, may I be healthy. Talking to yourself with kindness, allowing yourself to feel, and also those words that you can just touch your heart and soothe yourself.
I wonder, what changes do you think your family or your friends or your people in your life, what have they noticed in you? How's it changed?
In my family, my husband and my children, we understand better. Because of this, we understand much better our emotions, so we can talk about feelings. It's not like that. How are you? I'm good. I'm fine. No, it's I am sad. I'm frustrated, or I'm not happy, or I don't know what I feel sometimes. So it's just going beyond it. And I think that got us even closer together, because you may not agree on some things, but it's very important to validate, because our feelings, everybody's feelings, are valid. And I think that validation and that belief is very important in actually going to cultivating and nurturing empathy towards others that I was mentioning as a key lesson as well, when I was on my worst difficult times and my darkest times, like I just couldn't make it, Anita. I just wasn't functioning. Couldn't get out of bed. My brain was completely shut down. People taught me things that would either work for me or wouldn't work for me. So that was like, and that's what I said when I was writing, and I'm like, okay, what is it something that really helped me? And, when people demonstrated empathy, because sometimes we want to do our best to help others, and sometimes our best makes them feel not good, or worse, even worse, right? That toxic positivity, like that Hallmark message, like, oh, it's going to be okay, don't worry. Oh, no. That's like dismissing, right? When you're really trying to process, or you have the right to be sad and angry. So I learned to listen actively. And that listening is very important, because you just want to see, understand, listen what they're going through, instead of putting the Band-Aid and fixing and coming up with a solution that might work for you, but that person doesn't need that. So what is connecting, listening? What's going on? The other one is be curious and don't judge. And that is the curiosity from a point of view, and I want to say it like a healthy curiosity, not like a gossip curiosity, like, oh, what's going on? Tell me more so I can share with somebody else. Is that healthy curiosity that you want to explore. And that's that deep look into that person, like exploring, trying to understand what's going on. And with that curiosity, not judgment, also, I see like a wider look with the context, not looking at just that, but what is the context of this? Where is it coming from? Like a scope, like a zoom out, like as I say. And in that look also of non-judgment is be careful, because some words that we might say, they have consequences. So if somebody starts to open up and share their vulnerability, and we come up with, you shouldn't have done that, or I told you not to do so, that is judging. And that's something that you just want. I know it's not easy. That's like an automatic response, but we need to try to refrain from judging and just understanding and listening and being curious, like, tell me more, or what do you think that happened? Just trying to understand. And the other one, Anita, to me is the most powerful, is show up and be present. Because sometimes all we need is company, just a silence presence that is very, very powerful. And that's what my husband showed me in my hardest, difficult times, when I was on my flashbacks. I was like numb. And he just sat next to me. He hugged me like a baby, protected me, and say nothing. So I could hear his heart, and we could even breathe together. Connect that emotional connection that creates so much on our biology. You talked about it, the hormones, the oxytocin, the serotonin, all these feel-good hormones that really help me to boost myself, make me feel better within a few minutes or maybe hours, doesn't matter. And that even boosts your immune system, not only that. The third one is, you're not alone. So there's a powerful quote of Brené Brown that, like, empathy has no script, there's no good, right, bad. And the important thing is the message of, you're not alone, I'm here. And I love when you say empathy is not in silence, empathy is in action. Mm-hmm. So you're not alone, I'm here. So for those of you who are listening to this amazing podcast of empathy, my message is, you're not alone. If you can't find empathy in the people that are supposed to care for you, to love you, to protect you, there are kind souls out there in the world. friends, neighbors, and people you don't expect. That's what I say. Empathy comes sometimes, or in my experience, mostly from unexpected sources. Didn't come from the expected sources, but that doesn't mean there's no empathy in the world. So there's always somebody, there's always a Nancy willing you to give a hug, even breaking rules. Somebody who can offer you a warm hug, a kind word, because words really matter from the heart, and or a presence. I see you, I hear you, I'm here. And on the other hand, Anita, I messages like you're not alone. But on my other hand, on the other side is if you see someone alone and you can do something about it, your words, your empathy, your matters. So don't watch from the sidelines. Be there if you can do something for another person, because it is a superpower. A kind word, how are you? Or a smile, Anita. We don't know what other people go through. And doesn't it feel nice, refreshing when you're walking down the street and you see somebody and you smile and that smiles you back, the person smiles you back? When you're at the grocery store, you say, thank you. How many times I went to the grocery store when I was not feeling well? At the end of the day, when I had a little bit more strength around 4 p.m., I would just go with my sons. And the person, the cashier, would just a smile, look at you, say, hi. Really, she didn't know what I was going through. She didn't know how it was. But that connection, that gaze, that's something to the other person.
I've been listening to how my body's been feeling as you've been speaking, and I've sensed the need to take these like deep, delicious, long breaths in. So thank you. I feel like I've grounded myself by listening to you talk about the role that empathy has played in your life and the role that you believe empathy plays out in the world. Ha ha ha. Big breath, big breath. Ale, you're now a Pilates instructor and the author of a book, Little Book of Empathy. Can you tell me why you felt inspired to do both of those things?
Well, the little books, Anita, were in the moment, they were therapeutics, because I would read, I would be inspired by quotes, and those get me going, And also, and again, there's a quote by Brené Brown, and the quote was at the hospital, and it says, one day you will share your story, and it went kind of like that. It will be a survival guide for another person. So my story was lack of empathy, absence of empathy, and learning the importance of empathy, how empathy can heal, can help you grow, and can help you be resilient because you feel supported, right? So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to share how that affected myself, that helped me in my healing, in my transformational journey. Because if I didn't have that hope, that belief that I see you, I don't know where I would be, Anita, right now, to be honest with you. So that was my hope, to share the message of empathy, especially for those who really need it, because we never know who needs it, Anita, right? And for Pilates, what I learned also in my healing and my therapy of trauma, there are many, many modalities. The therapy that I went through is called EMDR. Yes, sorry, EMDR. So I learned how the body and the mind are intertwined. How we feel affects our body, and how our body affects how we feel. So it's both that connection. And in Pilates, I found that mind-body connection through breathing, through movement, healing. And I did it on myself, with myself, practice like breaths and movement, just also like, because the emotions are stored on our body too. And what I wanted to help others feel better, breathe better, feel better about themselves, understanding there's connection, mind, body, and that also that exercise is very good for the physical and mental health.
I have a penultimate question. Since you talked about how important this message is for other Latin American women, in particular, what significance does sharing this message of empathy mean for that community to you?
Mhm. Well, in Latin America, it must be changing, Anita. We are taught to be like women are taught to care for others, or, to put others first, like especially older sisters, maybe, you are the big one, you do that, you help others, you protect others, others. When self-care, when the care starts for the self. So I would say that for care for others, you have to take care for yourself. So self-care starts by oneself. You cannot give on an empty field. So when in Latin America, we tend to, put others first. Your wills and your priorities can be after the other person. That self-care is non-negotiable. And it's very important. The other aspect, Anita, is that, in Latin America, we tend to honor our families. Like our parents are the rulers, the patriarchal, and it's very important, yes, to honor our family. But when there is no respect for ourselves, we need to honor ourselves. We need to respect ourselves. And if somebody doesn't respect us, maybe a father, it's you can set boundaries, and you can decide whether you want to limit self boundaries, or maybe you need to remove yourself if that's going to affect your health. So it's like that patriarchal, that father's rule, sit at the head of he's always right, you can't contradict, he's in a mood, you can't say, does not help on mental and physical health, on the well-being of the person, and doesn't let you grow and thrive as well. So it's mostly on the status quo. Don't say anything, like women are, don't, what people are going to say. You have to be polite and restrained from saying maybe something, because people don't like it. When really authenticity is from within. That's also the other thing,
So let me invite you. I didn't plan to do this, but earlier in the conversation, when you were talking about being in the hospital, you were talking about how difficult it was to communicate because you weren't able to hug, but also because Spanish is your first language and you were in such a moment. I wonder if you could speak to your Spanish-speaking Latin American women sisters. If you had a minute to speak to them, what would you like to say?
Like in Spanish or in
Yes.
English, Anita? In Spanish?
Mm.
Wow, that's a very powerful question, Anita, because that doesn't require translation. That comes from the heart. Let me think a little bit about that, Anita. A ver, quisiera expresarte que no sufras en silencio, que no estás sola, que siempre hay una persona que está dispuesta o que puede ayudarte. Y también que no tengas miedo en pedir ayuda. Y Y es importante que te cuides, que te quieras, que te hables con compasión y que aceptes tus sentimientos. Es muy importante eso, que tú vales y que nadie puede, nadie puede apagar tu luz. That's the message, Anita. Pretty much that you matter, that maybe I'll get to share.
You not even have to explain because I understood. I don't even speak Spanish and I understood. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing.
And also, Anita, also like in Latin America, women tend to be, we like to be very, pretty and go to the hair salon and have those, like very coquetas, we say, like look pretty. But I think that beautiful and the prettiness and the most beautiful thing comes from within. So it's like, don't forget to go to the hair salon and also attend to your emotional and mental needs, which means love yourself, discover yourself, understand yourself, do that deep exploration, because the people sometimes tend to label us. I was labeled like the good girl. I was labeled la buenita. And because I was that, I was, allowing many things on heaviness, and allowing criticism, and no, that's not me. The real me does not want that. The real me does not like that, So it's like from within, how I am authentically, who I really am, not expect acceptance or belonging. Just you will belong where you want to belong authentically, and that will come organically, and that comes from within. So don't be afraid to do that big exploration, to grow, to flourish on your own unique beauty. And Anita, sometimes it takes therapy to do that. Sometimes big exploration and self-understanding, self-discovery. And in my culture, whoever goes to therapy, there's something wrong with them, when it's not the case. For me, therapy is a sign of strength, is a sign of personal willing to heal. And that happened to me, willing to heal and willing to grow. And that is an ongoing process, which is very scary because we don't want to look at our inner selves, which happened to me. I kept suppressing memories, hiding, digging them in my back, my unconscious mind. When what I needed to do, unpack, they say, like peel the onion to see what was going on. Because my life was beautiful before, Anita. I was just perfect life, material goods, and not needed anything. I had everything, but I didn't. The most important, and that's also love and empathy.
Been a very, very, very touching, soulful hour with you. We're coming on to the hour, and I always end these conversations with an invitation to think of a story, a time in your life when you were on the receiving end of empathy. Now, you've obviously shared a few through your healing journey, but maybe you have another story somewhere that you want to share where you could talk about so being on the receiving end of empathy, what that meant for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can think of a story. This happened in 2005. We just moved to California, and with our 2-year-old boys, twin boys, and I was pregnant with our daughter, Bella. So knowing Bella, the go-getter that she is, she decided to shake things up a week earlier. So she was due a week after. So it was a Friday, I started to feel the contractions, and I was alone with the kids in the house. My husband was an hour away for work. So I called my husband to take me to the hospital. He came rushing in, from an hour away. and the hospital, we just planned to move to the area of the hospital, was an hour away from us. So we had to pack for the kids. We had a new babysitter that we called her to help us. So I was in pain driving in the car, worried about where my kids, if the kids were going to be in the hotel. Miguel had to put the kids in the hotel with a new babysitter, myself, my baby, and what was expecting. So I was very nervous. And my husband dropped me off at the hospital, and then he was going to take the kids to the hotel. And when I was in the wheelchair, they take you, I was shaking, Anita. I was very scared for the health of the baby a week earlier, and I went to the room and I was still shaking, and people were like, are you with somebody? And I'm like, no, I'm alone. And I really felt alone because people were, she's alone. Come, they do the pulse and all of that. And I was very scared. But my OBGYN walked in the room. And as soon as she walked in the room, she approached to the bed. She looked at me in the eye, and I could see her blue eyes and hear her kind words. She said, "Don't worry, honey. I'm going to take care of you and the baby." So as soon as I heard those words, felt that empathy, I stopped trembling, and I knew that I and the baby and Belita were going to be okay.
I love that. That's why there's a whole chapter in the book devoted to what I call empathy superheroes, which are all those people in healthcare. You've mentioned many of them in this story. People who work as humanitarians, I think teachers to a large extent are empathy heroes. So yeah, I love asking that question. I never know the story I'll hear, but I'm always reminded by the time I get off this call again and again and again that empathy is available to us if we decide to lean into it. And the invitation is always, let's turn up the volume of empathy in our lives.
Yeah. And I wrote a little sentence, Anita, to end the podcast, if I may allow to say it or to read it. So empathy is a superpower. It connects us, helps us heal, and offers light in dark moments. I hope my story reminds everyone that empathy is a bridge that brings us closer and helps us find hope.
Thank you, Ale. Thank you, Alejandra, so much for sharing your story. Thank you for writing your book and for spending this hour with me. Thanks everyone who's been watching and listening. We'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand that the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Please now consider subscribing or buying a copy of Purposeful Empathy. Thanks again. Have a great day.